Welcome to the Holding Time podcast. Here we discuss breastfeeding in all its complexity, the ups and downs, the challenges and the triumphs. Whether you are expectant, a new mother, or simply interested, I hope you'll appreciate the incredible warrior women featured in this series. In this mini-series, we go back to feature some mothers who helped to shape the Holding Time project in Coventry. These interviews took place over Zoom in 2020, quite often under lockdown. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Find out more by visiting holdingtime.org or support us on our Patreon channel, Holding Time.
My name's Emilie. I have one child, a little girl called Jean. She is 3 years and almost 4 months, and I am still breastfeeding her, which was not part of the plan, although there wasn't really a set plan. I was always planning to try breastfeeding. My close circle of friends, everyone had an absolute nightmare with tongue ties, hospitalization, not gaining enough weight, just lots of problems, and tended to stop after a couple of weeks or a month or so. So I said, well, I'm going to try it because why not? That's what you're supposed to do. And I'll stop like 6 months when they start to eat solid food, they get teeth. I'll stop then. But my daughter didn't get teeth until she was 14 months old. So we just kept going. And it was the hardest thing, I think. Breastfeeding was much harder than the pregnancy, than labour even. It was tough going, but also just the most incredible experience that, she loves. I love that time together and just don't know when it will stop, really.
When I was a baby, I'd never heard the term full-term breastfeeding. Have you ever heard that term?
I have. I follow a few hashtags on Instagram, like normalized breastfeeding, extended breastfeeding, and full-term breastfeeding, which then implies that there's a point at which you have to reach, or if you go further than that, it's
Full-term is where the baby weans from cells, which all babies do.
Yeah, between 2 and 7, I heard.
Typically, it seems that most babies kind of forget about it once they've got all their molars, and they're eating like the food. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Anecdotally, mothers that I've spoken to, I suppose I've spoken to quite a few, say that that's around 2 3/4 to 3. But it can be later. Obviously, your daughter's older, but she got her teeth very late. So you might be looking at a longer period, but it does seem like there is a relationship between the period of time and the teeth.
Okay.
But that's, you're talking to an artist and not a qualified paediatrician. But
yeah,
just from the women that I've spoken to. One of the things that's interesting about this work is that I think women have just got so much knowledge, and it's nowhere. It's now we've got forums. I was going to ask you, those normalised hashtags and stuff?
Yeah.
Were you aware of any of those in pregnancy?
No. The only sort of knowledge I had was what my friends had told me.
Yeah, and your friends had a hard time.
Yeah, really awful.
So did you have any role models, like were you breastfed, for example, like your mum or your partner?
Yeah, I was breastfed. My partner was breastfed. Yeah. But my mum wasn't breastfed, and I remember her telling me that her mum kind of was a bit sort of prudish about it, or because she was born in the 50s when there was this sort of, development of formula and, convenience, and you don't need to breastfeed because you can get everything you need from the formula. Whereas mum was very much like, you're going to have breast milk, she always talks about how she would make ice cream so that we didn't have any E numbers and this kind of thing. She wanted to go more natural. Whereas I was just, well, I'm going to try, but I don't think it will work because it doesn't seem to work for people I know. So, but it did eventually.
I mean, it's kind of the luck of the draw, really, whether you know people that do breastfeed or not. If you're British, which I'm assuming you are,
Yeah.
you know, because we don't really have a culture of breastfeeding here, so quite often people don't have a breastfeeding mentor, you know, someone that can kind of ease them through the early stages, or breastfeed in front of them, or
Yeah.
that sort of exchange of knowledge, you know, directly person to person.
Yeah.
Did you have anyone that you felt gave you support? Where do you feel you got your support from?
I took Jean to a breastfeeding support meeting, like at a local school, when she was 2 weeks old, because I had heard, I can't remember if this was, my friend had told me, and she had a lot of trouble, that she was told if you have pain at all when you breastfeed, then something's wrong, like the latch is wrong, or, you know, the position is wrong. So because it obviously hurt, I thought, well, I must be doing it wrong. I went along when Jean was 2 weeks old and got some advice about positions, but it still hurt, you know, to the point where I was crying when she was latching. So maybe she didn't have a good latch, but she was gaining weight. There was never any issue about that. And we were going for quite a long time and regularly. It settled her. So I kind of took advice from lots of different places, the Leche League, the National Breastfeeding Association, or whatever it's called, and kind of pieced it together and followed basically what I felt fitted with maybe my instincts and what suited me as well.
Because you didn't set out to breastfeed, and as you say, it wasn't part of the plan to breastfeed for 3 and however many months, you know. I mean, do you think it's ever part of the plan for any first mother to breastfeed for that long?
Yeah, I mean, I work at a university in research, in project management and research support, and the centre that I was in was very much about sustainability. They were very much like breastfeeding. The breastfeeding, is it okay if I breastfeed in the meetings? Which some people were like, well, like, you can't do that. But why can't you do that? You know? So I think some people, it is part of the plan. And yeah, it's just dependent on what your background is, maybe your values in other areas.
Oh, I wonder if there's lots of women breastfeeding during meetings now, because, you know, it's just so easy to turn your camera off on Zoom, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
You can have privacy and you can breastfeed if you want, and you can be doing
Well.
it while at a work meeting. I mean, working from home is changing so much about. For those women who can work from home, it is really changing things. Apparently, it is having an effect on breastfeeding statistics.
Okay.
I mean, not actually, I don't think as much because of that. If there hasn't been there's so little money in breastfeeding research that you don't, you know, it's hard to get to the bottom of it. But the suggestion is that it's actually due to the lack of visitors.
Okay.
That actually in those first few weeks, you know, when you're really establishing breastfeeding, it's a real interruption having people come into the house, you know, unless you live within a sort of really breastfeeding friendly community where everybody who comes is going to expect your breast to be out, you know, then it's going to be quite a big adjustment for you as a new mother to suddenly have your breast out when your neighbour comes into your baby, or when your, you know, your mother-in-law or whoever. I mean, it's just. Did you find that part of it uncomfortable, or
No? I was given covers to use. My friends who always covered up would cover her baby completely with, and then there was one that you put around yourself like a sling kind of thing. But I just found them all so awkward that I just kind of would have a jumper with a vest, and I'd pull the vest down and lift the jumper up or whatever, and I would just do it. Yeah, it didn't bother me at all. And people would leave the room and I was like, no, you don't. It's fine. You can be here. Because I didn't want them to be embarrassed. I suppose I was trying to make it normal. Because it is normal.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, it's just become not normal because it's become uncommon. It's like kids playing outside, isn't it? It's like, well, they've been doing that to millennia, but all of a sudden, if you see a child playing outside now, you think, oh, that child must be in trouble, you know. And it's just because what normal has changed, and it's hard then to change it back once you lose that naturalness, that lack of discomfort. It's hard to get that back, across the board. And it starts to be an attention grabbing thing to breastfeed in public simply because other people aren't doing it.
Or, yeah, I think through some of the things that I follow on Instagram, like the normalized breastfeeding and drop the cover, and it's almost like it happened to me, breastfeeding, and so I wasn't equipped to deal with it, but I was doing it. And if I was out and about in a cafe and people would see me and think, okay, well, it's normal, then it's okay, it's accepted, then that was almost like I had a duty to
do that. Yeah, I think also once you have breastfed a toddler, as I have as well, I breastfed a toddler on the bus, I breastfed a toddler on the train, and sitting at the park breastfeeding is something you leave long behind once you've got to like a year and a half. It becomes so natural for you that you can't understand why other people have a problem with it. So, and you realise it really is their problem and not yours. And actually, it's probably not even their problem. It's just kind of how they were led to believe they should think, There's a sense of proprietary in something. It's something to do with sexualising breasts, isn't it? I mean, unfortunately, that did really coincide with the formula industry. I mean, those two things seem to be very connected to the 1950s or into the 60s. And, so your mum did really well in that environment, to breastfeed you, brothers and sisters. But.
Yeah, well, apparently because she was pregnant then with my brother, she kind of weaned me. Otherwise, potentially she would have kept going, I suppose. But she didn't tandem feed.
Because even people don't realise you can.
No.
Because, again, we just don't have those role models. That's why I've made a point of having tandem feeders in the series. So you can see that. It was quite extraordinary. I met a mother who was feeding her daughter, who was probably a similar age, and a 1-year-old in the shoot. And there was a moment when they were both feeding at the same time, which was, I think, actually, to be truthful, I think it was a bit unusual. I actually had 2 mothers that did that. In shoots, but typically they seem to take turns.
Okay.
I mean, it's I suppose every family's different in how they go about it, and some women really find that pregnancy puts them off breastfeeding, that they don't feel like it, and obviously breasts change, don't they? And it's can be kind of tender. But what's really miraculous is that if you do breastfeed, if you do have another child and you do breastfeed, then apparently you can produce colostrum from one breast and regular milk from the other.
Yeah.
Simultaneously.
Yeah.
I mean, we really don't understand a lot of breastfeeding, I think.
No. And
it's really extraordinary.
Yeah. You see these pictures of like people that have expressed thank you. And then they've been ill, and one pouch of milk is like bright yellow and the other one has got it's creamier, or all the antibodies from pads. And that's one of the main reasons why I'm still breastfeeding, is because like it's never going to not be good for her, and she's a healthy girl. Yeah.
Well, I think worldwide the mean age of breastfeeding is 4.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to a new mother, someone who's contemplating breastfeeding for the first time?
I would say that it is absolutely your choice. If it's easy, then you're lucky. You get to 3 months, say, and they say that you should be like, it's embedded now, everything's fine. Even then, at 3 months, I had got mastitis and thrush, and you think, well, I've got to 3 months, so it's sorted, but it's not. It's never sorted. So if it's something that you think would benefit you or your baby, then have a go. But, the most important thing is your well-being and your child's well-being. So don't destroy yourself trying to breastfeed when there are perfectly good alternatives. fed is best.
Of the women you know who couldn't breastfeed, what's your understanding about how they feel about that now? I mean, have any of them had other children where they had managed to feed them, or did it put them off completely?
One example was she had a baby and the baby had a tongue tie and really struggled to feed, didn't get back to the birth weight, ended up in hospital, on feeding programs and pumping, and just a real slog. And then it got easier, and then had another baby, so stopped feeding the first one. And then with the second one, there was none of that. It's luck of the draw, I think. But I think for those who have stopped maybe earlier than other people maybe would have persevered, but it was the right decision for them. And they made the same choice with the second baby. They did the sort of the colostrum and the first few days, and then did exactly the same thing with the next one, and are okay with that because everyone's happy. There's a lot of expectation and then guilt, and it's really
a big adjustment, isn't it, Mara? There's kind of a lot of hurdles, and I think we're kind of prepared for the birth. That's the thing we're told to expect to be difficult, and then immediately after the birth, breastfeeding begins. We typically have no preparation, and it lasts for months.
Yeah,
that's why perhaps some women just stop it right away, because as soon as they discover that their nipples are cracking and it's painful, and I suppose they feel, well, this isn't worth it because I need to sleep or I need to myself.
Yeah.
But it's quite complicated, the relationship between mental health and breastfeeding. And it's not really properly understood. Women can feel really bad if they can't breastfeed, and that can make them depressed. And on the other hand, breastfeeding can protect you against depression. So got two sides to it, And again, we have a lot of research into it, but
no, I was going to say I've had issues with mental health, and was seeing a perinatal mental health counsellor after the birth. And I think maybe because the way it manifested with me, with sort of anxiety and maybe elements of OCD, the fact that I was breastfeeding, that was something that, although it wasn't perfect and it hurt and I was kind of powering through, it was working. That was something that, naturally I could do. Like, my brain and my mental health might be sort of not wired correctly, in this moment, but at least my boobs were working, and that gave me strength.
It's interesting to me because your second person commentary that's cited baby loses weight with a mother being taken back into hospital. That's not something that they do down here. And certainly my daughter lost 10% of her weight, and nobody ever suggested that would be going back into hospital, which is actually what I needed.
Really?
It's quite a nice thing that they seem to do in Coventry, or maybe it's like a West Midlands policies that you bring a woman back into the hospital where they have 24-hour supervision and access to proper, decent pumps.
Yeah.
Just to rescue that situation. I mean, that's a really good way of rescuing it. And I've talked to women in Coventry where that has been enough, to completely sort them out, and they've got through that rough patch. But I didn't have any of that support. I had to pay a lactation consultant. And what I noticed looking back, now I know much more about it, is just, I was getting up every single day and making the bed and tidying the whole house. I mean, it was just really manic. And I didn't really recognize it. I just knew that everything felt incredibly out of control. And actually losing that breastfeeding relationship really flipped me over into feeling like a real failure.
It's an emotional thing, though, because it's
isn't it? You
very much responsibility, though, on you. Yeah.
It's so vulnerable. I mean, I've got a puppy right now, and the puppy is, we're worried about the puppy falling off the bed. We're worried about the puppy sleeping at night. And, the puppy, if it dies, I mean, I'm not going to go to jail. It would just be an unfortunate accident if it does fall off the bed and crack its skull. But, I mean, your baby, you can take home this thing, and it's like, it's not even a legal process. It's the fact you love it so much, and then you're so worried about it, and then it's losing weight. I mean, women are really, I suppose why I started doing this work is, firstly, probably like you, I got to a point with breastfeeding eventually where I just thought, this thing is just so amazing. Why don't we know more about it? But also because of those incredibly difficult first days with all those problems with mental health. And my husband ended up with postnatal depression. And I think a lot of that was because I had postnatal depression undiagnosed. I mean, it triggered it in him,
Yeah.
And I really can point to that day 10 when I got that double mastitis thing in a moment when we both careered off. Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting sort of area for discussion, mental health and breastfeeding. I mean, I never write anywhere that I had postnatal depression because I was never diagnosed with it.
Yeah.
But when people tell me the symptoms of it, I think, oh yeah. I mean, I definitely had one of those symptoms. But I think the midwives quite often are just so busy. They just come around, look at you. If you're in a nice house and you look like you've got a decent partner, you're not,
Yeah.
They just think, yeah, you're fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to sign you off. Is that all right? And that's what they do. They just leave you to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my doctor said to me, you, not necessarily somebody who had postnatal depression, you might not just have been someone who's depressed too. Because I've taken antidepressants in the past and I've, had a history of anxiety. And when this started to crank up during pregnancy, I self-referred because I didn't want any pre-existing mental health problems I had to adversely affect the baby or that time after the birth, because I knew it was going to be tough. I wanted to kind of preempt anything. But then it turned out I had to be induced anyway. So my first appointment was actually on the day when I ended up going in to be induced. So there's so many different routes and stories and whether like you're depressed and have a baby or you have a baby and then you're depressed, like just to add the breastfeeding on top of that as a responsibility for you solely, it's a lot.
What you said, which is that breastfeeding may have helped, that's common. That's commonly reported that women feel that it gives them a sense of control. It's something that you can do it's producing great chemicals, so it's just probably balancing out your brain chemistry as you do. Yeah. I used to find it really intensely relaxing, kind of a bit like meditating. Which is why the installation I've made has got this timepiece thing growing, because of just this wonderful sense of like being in this abstract space where, like a bubble or a cocoon, but outside of time,
Yeah. Well, when I first started, when Jean was first born, those times when I was feeding in the middle of the night or, any time on maternity leave, I didn't do NCT. So my maternity leave was a really lonely time. So I'd be on my phone, she'd be feeding, I'd be on my phone or playing Scrabble or social media or whatever. And then it got to the point where talking to my therapist, talking about mindfulness and being present, and I just have never once looked at my phone since then. Like, because, even if it's just for 20 minutes or 5 minutes, it's like, that is time when I am being a mother. And no one in the world, like in her life, has that time with her. And it's really sort of struck me recently, I think, in lockdown, because she feeds in the morning when she wakes up. And, she's ill. It's not throughout the day. But to have that time, and I spend that time talking to her about how much I love her, or memories from when she was little, when I was pregnant, when she was in my tummy. If she is going to be my only baby, then I don't know, we get all emotional. Like, I just want to remember it. I don't want to be scrolling through my phone instead of having that time with her.
I think motherhood is this amazing opportunity to connect with ourselves and like a bigger part of ourselves, a part that we didn't even know we had. And you tap into something that's really ancient, useful. And it is easy, just the same as you can stand, in a beautiful landscape and be on social media or doing a selfie and like not be there. It is really very possible to, I don't think you can spend all of motherhood on your phone, but you can miss a lot of it by not recognizing how mindful it is. And that is why the project's called Holding Time. And that is why it has a timepiece, even though when I started to describe to people at the beginning that it's this animation, it's got these, basically the way the women are animated is designed to look the way I felt when I was breastfeeding. I'm trying to create something that people can see that expresses how it feels to breastfeed, which is to be in a slower world. You're in real time, but you're in a slower reality.
I didn't realise how rare it is to breastfeed really in this country, certainly for this amount of time. So I wish I'd have known the things that I know now before she was born. And if it helps people, give them confidence, I think that's really important because it is such a wonderful thing.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to everyone involved, our funders, the infant feeding team and University Hospital Coventry and Warwick for their support, along with all the amazing mothers and partners who helped to make this project happen. You can learn more about the project by visiting holdingtime.org and support us on our Patreon channel. There's a link in the description. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like, follow or subscribe so you don't miss any of our content.